Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 27th session of our YSBC Web Lecture Series. The topic of today's conversation is PS Kitchen, a social business restaurant in New York. We have with us our speaker, Miss April Tam. April Tam-Smith is a managing director in a large US investment firm on the equity derivatives team for the last 16 years. Outside of the office, April has spent time in Haiti and South Africa serving at orphanages and social businesses. She also works locally with the vulnerable in New York City, including victims of trafficking and those previously incarcerated. April's goal is to connect her two lives to create a ripple effect, inviting more people to be involved in creating meaningful work for all. This has led to opening PS Kitchen, a social business that uses 100% of its net profit to fund justice work while hiring those in need of a second chance. April is the recipient of the 2018 Social Enterprise Leadership Award from Columbia University and has been featured on CBS News, ABC News, and Asian American Life. She serves on numerous nonprofit boards, including Share Hope, Justice Rising, Defy Ventures, and Restore NYC. Today, we also have with us our moderator, Ms. Monica Yunus. Soprano Monica Yunus is the co-founder of Sing for Hope. Ms. Yunus has performed with the world's leading opera companies, including the Metropolitan Opera, Washington National Opera, and Zouk Festival, and in recitals in Spain, Guatemala, and her native Bangladesh. She has been named a 2016 Young Global Leader of the World Economic Forum, honored with the 21st Century Leaders Award as the New Yorker of the Week by NY1, and named one of the top 50 Americans in philanthropy by Town and Country. A leading voice in the Artist as Citizen discussion, she has performed and spoken at the Fortune's Most Powerful Women Summit, School World Forum, Aspen Ideas Festival, and the United Nations. So now today, let us listen to these amazing ladies and their story. But first, let us play a video on PS Kitchen. I kindly request the IT team to play a video.
I'm Minnie Rowe. PS Kitchen is not your ordinary New York City hipster restaurant. It's a restaurant with a social conscience. It's a place where people in need can get a job, where they give a hand up, not a hand out. Co-founded by an Asian American immigrant, PS Kitchen is her way of paying it forward.
I feel pretty good.
Raul Rivera is feeling good now, but just a few years ago, he was at the end of his rope.
I looked at myself one day and I said, what is it that you want? What do you want to do with your life? And I said, I'm tired of using drugs. I'm tired of running around the street.
Rivera grew up in the crime-infested South Bronx in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. He was addicted to heroin by the time he was 17, which led to a life in and out of prison. His lowest point was a decade ago when he was homeless and facing another stint behind bars for stabbing a man in a shelter while under the influence of drugs. That's when a judge told him it was either rehab or prison for 7 more years.
To make a change was really uncomfortable for me because I was so used to doing what I was doing, using drugs, committing crimes, and doing things of that nature. So I was so comfortable in that zone.
But he stuck with rehab and eventually got clean. He emerged a changed man, ready to start a new chapter in his life. That's when he realized that his past was holding him back.
It mind boggled me that I will come so dressed up to a job interview and expecting for this guy to hire me, and I'm a changed man, things should be going right for me, but that wasn't the case. All I wanted was an opportunity. I just want somebody to give me a chance.
Down the road in New York City's Times Square is a vegan restaurant called PS Kitchen that's helping people just like Rivera. Created by April Tam-Smith, an Asian American immigrant, the restaurant's mission is to offer employment opportunities for people whose backgrounds put them at a disadvantage. People with a criminal record, recovering drug addicts, and those who are struggling with homelessness.
If I want to help in a sustainable way, in a way that it's going to help them help themselves in a way, doing a business that can offer meaningful work opportunities was the way to go.
A recent study by Prison Policy Initiative, a nonprofit bipartisan advocacy group, found that at its height in 2008, the unemployment rate for the formerly incarcerated was over 27%, which is higher than the unemployment rate during any historical period in U.S. history, including the Great Depression.
As hard as we try to get the resumes ready, to try to, get them new clothes and do different interviews, it's really, really hard at the end of the day if a company or an organization cannot get over that check, and just seeing someone with a difficult background might not necessarily give them that chance they need for the first open door.
Tam-Smith fully understands the struggle to find good employment. Her parents immigrated from Hong Kong when she was 11 years old, and she recalls the hardships of those early days. As an only child, she felt the burden to excel. She received scholarships to MIT, Columbia Business School, and is working full-time as a Wall Street banker. For all intents and purposes, she had achieved the American dream. But Tam-Smith has bigger dreams of paying it forward.
I am so grateful for the opportunity that I was given, that my family was given when we moved to the States. And I just felt like, wow, like who am I that I got so many opportunities? Monica's dinner behind the curtain at 5:45.
She threw herself into giving back, volunteering with trafficking victims, the previously incarcerated, and creating job opportunities for Haitians. That's when she came up with the concept for PS Kitchen, a place that provides employment to those in need, is environmentally friendly, hence the vegan menu, and here's the really interesting part, gives away 100% of its profits to charity.
It's definitely confusing for people. We don't take a salary, of course, at all. It's completely volunteering. Our goal is really just to have a place that gives away the max amount of profit.
So when Rivera walked into that job interview for a dishwasher, fully expecting another rejection, he was overcome by their response.
He says, "Can you be here tomorrow at 6 o'clock?" And I looked at him and I said, "You're hiring me?" He says, "Yeah, be here tomorrow at 6 o'clock. I said, "All right." So I walk out the building and I go right into the corner where the fire department is, and I just put my head up against the wall and I just started crying, man.
Tam-Smith says witnessing employees like Rivera rebuild their lives is the reason she created PS Kitchen. As for Rivera, PS Kitchen is not just a job, it's his salvation.
One thing that I would never forget that Raul has said to me, because of this job, I feel valuable. I have that dignity. I'm worth something to society again.
I get up every morning looking forward to coming here.
Tam-Smith says PS Kitchen is only the beginning. She hopes to one day open a second location in New York City and even dreams of taking it to a global stage. I'm Minnie Rowe for Asian American Life.
Wow, what an inspiring video. I think today, once we listen to her story, it's going to be even more incredible. Helping people in need, neglected parts of the society is incredible. It takes incredible amount of courage to even go there and start something and do it. So we're really, really excited to hear your story today, Miss April. So without further delay, I would like to now call Professor Yunus to welcome our speaker and moderator today. Professor Yunus, the floor is yours now.
Thank you, Zinat. I'm absolutely delighted to welcome them. It's a fantastic evening. It's going to be a wonderful discussion. Two ladies who have been a superstar for social business. Both of them are working, they're doing their social business based in New York City. So that's the story we'll be hearing. And Monica, of course, is my daughter. So I have to exaggerate things probably, so I don't have to say anything for her. She is a fantastic singer. And besides that, she has set up her own social business. That's the most important part that I would like to introduce to you. As a singer, she is a very accomplished singer, but she wanted to bring arts for the help, for the to serve the people, to the society. So while we are trying to bring the sports world to the society, to use the power of the sports to the society, Monica decided to bring her world of sports and music and performance to the service of the people and impact on the society. So that she has told that story in another segment of the lecture series. You can watch that. But today she's the moderator, talking to April. April is a good friend of both of us. We have been her place several times. And April is a wonderful person that you already saw it in the video. She, after seeing her, you cannot believe that she works in another world, in the high finance world. When you cannot imagine she's the managing director of in the Morgan Stanley derivative trading. Wow, equity and derivative trading. Very caption sounds so threatening, and that's what she manages her life. This is her career. But you wouldn't believe that out of that career, she wanted to do something very different. And not only she's doing it the first time, she has been doing it for a long time. She makes it trips to Haiti and South Africa and so on. That's where I met her actually. In one of the my trip to Haiti, she was with me along with many other people who were visiting with me. And we discussed lots of things. And I didn't realize that she will take it so seriously that she'll create this unique example. PS Kitchen is a story, is a thrilling story. How you bring the hardened prisoners from the prison when they come out, have no place for them in the society. And April bring out their welcoming home for them to come to the work in the PS Kitchen. And they cannot believe themselves for the first time, as you heard in the video. So this is the story, how she made it a very successful one, and it's a very thrilling one. I welcome April for this presentation. And Monica, now the floor is yours. You can start your discussion.
Great.
Thank you, Monica.
Great.
Thank you so much, Dr. Yunus.
Thank you. Well, we are so delighted to be here. And I told April I was chatting with her this past week when I got to meet her beautiful newborn. April is a new mother, which is always something to celebrate. So we're so delighted, April. Thank you so much for being here today. And I'm excited to delve into your incredible story. So first question, we had the opportunity to watch that beautiful video, which really gave us a great overview of what PS Kitchen is all about. But I want to start with you. I want to start to hear a little bit about where your background a bit. The video touched on it a little bit, but I'd love to hear about your immigrant experience in the United States, and also just what values brought you to this social business world and in parallel to everything that you do on Wall Street.
Well, thank you so much, Bo, for having me. It is funny that Dr. Yunus, you do have that impact. Little did I know that after such a trip, I would now find myself running and owning a restaurant in New York City. People often ask, how did you get here? How do you think about, as you know, signing a 15-year lease in Times Square and taking a really scary risk to start a restaurant? But what I want to encourage everyone is that, you know, Mother Teresa has a wonderful quote that says, when you can't feed 100, just feed one. It's all about that baby steps. You take one step at a time and you try to make a difference in that one person's life. And I would say, for me, it's being an immigrant kid, growing up in Hong Kong and moving here. And as I mentioned, just seeing that there were so many people within the community that really rallied around us. And my parents, soon after that, also thought we should contribute in that way ourselves. So we started driving other kids whose parents might be working all the time in restaurants to go to school at 6 a.m. in the morning. And my parents would be the volunteer drivers for all 5 other kids and different things like that. And I think I always just learned that I could play my own small part, whatever way. And shortly after, when I finally got to MIT and wanting to volunteer more, I started volunteering at a community center, which then later on led to my first trip to South Africa. And again, these are just little examples of like, hey, I'm 22 years old. What can I give? Hey, I'm 25 years old now. I started working in a bank. I have a bit of savings. What can this bit of saving actually do for the world? And I would say, knowing that, you know, for someone like my mom, who I'm sure has the same potential as I did, but because she had to start working in a clothing factory when she was 8 or 9 years old and full-time by the time she was 11, allow me to see there's potential, but then there's just a lot of opportunities that really almost have nothing to do with you. And if you were given those things, then it's our job to just grab it and just really do as much as we can, not just for ourselves, but for everyone else too. So I think that kind of gratitude, it's what's really rooted in a lot of these things. So it feels genuine and passionate. And it allows you to have a lot more runway to have 2 jobs, like you and I sometimes joke about. That seems impossible.
Absolutely. So, April, you had this fortuitous meeting with Dr. Yunus. I wonder if there was a part of that conversation that sparked specifically a restaurant social business in one of the hardest cities in the world probably to run a restaurant. It's not so easy. I don't know what the statistics are for how many restaurants are in New York City. I bet you could spend a lifetime trying each and every one and never get through them all. So why was it something that, you know, what was part of that conversation that made you think, okay, you know what, I'm going to start a restaurant and it's going to be a social business and it's going to have all these different layers to it. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about that.
Thank you for asking. I have already, at that point, I have already read Dr. Yunus's book and I was completely inspired by it. And I was actually personally already donating and supporting a few social businesses through the model. And like Dr. Yunus mentioned, we were in Haiti, where I was personally supporting a wonderful social business called Share Hope that employs women in Sanape, the industrial area, and then we put 100% of the profits back to cervical cancer screening, breast cancer screening, high school completion programs, etc. And then through our wedding registry, we decided to fund one of the Yunus social business as our entire registry, which was both the baby food company as well as castor oil company. So it was just a fun way to have this kind of impact through our wedding. So we got to see these businesses with Dr. Yunus. But I think it was seeing it, as you can imagine, and just watching all these women. I still have the photos on my phone, just loving their jobs. And there's such a sense of purpose. You know, I remember watching them work hard at these castor oil and just knowing that they're the ones that are bringing food home and knowing that they are providing for their family. And I think there is something really inspiring to me on job creation and why I continue to love the idea of like hand up as opposed to hand out. One story I always remember in Haiti, in that social business I mentioned, there was this line, this like twist back tank top that the business was creating. And nobody thought these factories could handle it. The style's too complicated. That's not what we do in Haiti. We just do t-shirts. I don't know if we can handle it. And the founder of this social business just really were determined. I can teach them, I can help. Let's get this going. And it became the longest lasting 18 months long style that they had. And on that very last day, completely spontaneously, when they finished this last piece, all the women, all these workers just stood up and gave the style a standing ovation. So imagine just like a wave of women standing and clapping for the style. And they just started saying, because of this,
we were able to put food on our table. Because of this, we paid for our kids' tuition. And it just kind of tied back to Dr. Yunus' book on why poverty can belong in a museum, why that having these models where all the profits go back out or the profits go back to the community in need can make such a difference, so that we don't have to continue to do these handouts that might not be helpful. Last thing I would say too, on that trip, somebody had said to me, April, you can't beat free. And what they were trying to say, the context is that his family had owned a soap factory for 30 years. And after the terrible earthquake, and obviously so many people meant well, and it was flooded with supplies, but they had to close down their family business because there was so much free soap on the ground that it completely destroyed the economy of people wanting to buy his product. And again, that just really ties back to, that's why we support the local businesses. And the recent earthquake, when we put together these care packages, we were very clear to supporters and donors and people who want to help. We're going to buy as much as we can on the ground. So rice, beans, soap, we're buying everything Haiti made to really support businesses.
That's incredible, and a really interesting point, because again, you want to be supporting the local economy so that economy does not fall apart, as it does, as it can do in a crisis. I'm really struck by your fantastical balance of all the different things that you do. So as mentioned at the beginning, you have a full-time job in a very intense Wall Street kind of setting with derivatives and equity trading. And at the same time, you're running your social business. How does one balance that, not just time-wise, but just the difference in mentality, the sort of capitalist and your social business hat? How do you wear those at the same time, or do you wear them at the same time?
Yeah, I love that you said it's not just about time, because often people, that is what they think about, like, how do you do it all? But really, it's the engine that keeps me going. As you can tell, I am deeply passionate about this. And if it's not for the fact that I get to go to Haiti and I get to work with people like yourself and Dr. Yunus, and I get to run a restaurant, I don't know if I even have the same energy and passion when I go do my day job. It is getting to see what my business skills that I learned from my 16 years of being in the business world, quote unquote, get to be translated to another type of business. And it's really not that different in the sense of, I want a thriving business. And that's why I love and felt so pulled to the idea of social businesses, because it's sustainable. It's a business. It's just that we're using the profit differently, just that we give away the profit. It's just that the profits are invested back into the workers, and the fact that it can be invested back to the community, but we still want a thriving business. And that's actually really why I called it PS. I would love for people to think about it first as a beautiful restaurant that you enjoy the food and you enjoy the atmosphere. Oh, PS. Actually, exactly. Just a side. This is what we do with our profits. This is how we think about second chance hiring. This is why we think about our food and being 100% plant-based, so that it's, climate forward, et cetera. But you're not coming because you're guilt-tripped into coming. You're coming because you love the idea and you love our business. And that's kind of how I think the two worlds really collide, and in fact has been, I would say, symbiotic. Colleagues and I have gotten to have very personal, deep, lively conversations about their hopes and dreams and their passion and what they want their kids to grow up to be like, and having brought numerous coworkers with me to Haiti, or even their kids to Haiti, has, you can imagine, allowed me to have a much deeper personal relationship with people I work with.
So it becomes a hub for awareness building about what social business means, which is another beautiful layer to what PS Kitchen is in that community. Take us back. So you go and you meet Dr. Yunus in Haiti, you have this conversation. You've been working in this, wanting to give back to community through your skill set. You meet Dr. Yunus, you decide, okay, I'm going to do a social business. Why a restaurant?
Yes.
And why in the middle of one of the most difficult places to run a restaurant? What was sort of the initial thinking? Because I feel like with your intense skill set, you could have chosen a product of some sort or something else. So why the restaurant industry in particular?
Thank you. Thanks for bringing me back to that. So at that point, I remember just wanting to hit as many of the principles in the social business book as I can. And so many of it just honestly, genuinely just line up with what I believe in. I wanted it to be, climate friendly. I wanted it to provide fair opportunity for so many people. But I would say,
take this too. I'm going to interrupt you for just a second because I'm fascinated with the vegan aspect. So tell us let's dig into that, because there are so many layers, and I really want to be clear for our incredible international audience why specifically veganism and how that might affect the business model, really, because that already segments who's coming to your restaurant. And so that presents another challenge. So why veganism?
Yes, thank you. So just to be clear, I've kind of gone my passionate path and speaking quickly. So PS, we donate all the profits. PS, we employ people who might need a second chance. It's not all of our staff, so that we have people that can train, but we have a strong focus on people who are coming home from trafficking or incarceration or previous homelessness, et cetera, et cetera. And then PS, all the food are 100% plant-based. And to your point, I think I just want this to be max ROI, max return on investment in terms of impact. So thinking about what are the things that we can do with this one tiny space in Times Square that can have the most amount of impact, right? And I actually studied environmental engineering at MIT, and it's kind of something that I've never really gotten to use, in my day job.
I didn't know that. Wow.
I still don't have a vegan restaurant, but the more I learned about it, it just became so clear to me that this is something that is better for the environment, for the consumers. You don't have to be 100% plant-based, but it makes such a big difference. And so much of my life is about passion and justice, right? And I think that the idea of justice has also a lot to do with climate change, because people who contribute the least to climate change are suffering the most. And it's undeniable when you go to a place like Haiti or Cambodia, or just seeing really all around us, the shattering impact of climate change, right? And that, to me, we must do something about that. But no, you're totally right. You can imagine at the time, myself, my husband, and our wonderful business partner and his wife, I think I've told you this, I was the only one that was 30. Everyone was still in their 20s, and we signed a 15-year lease. And everyone thought we were crazy, and some even really well-intentionally tried to talk me out of it. And to make matter a bit harder, I then went on to say, oh, and it's also going to be a vegan restaurant. And they were just like, okay, you wouldn't pick one of the hardest locations.
How is this going to work in Times Square in the middle of New York? How is this going to work?
With all the investment banks around it. And you can imagine a lot of people at the time weren't truly convinced that that is the way to go. But what has been an amazing surprise is when coming back to the idea of being a quality business, I take zero credit in this. Literally, I can't cook for the life of me, but my wonderful staff have created such an amazing menu that meat eaters, non-meat eaters, vegan, whatever you are, actually really enjoy our food. And especially the theater community, the cast, the shows goer have really just embraced us and our plant-based menu. And also
I
allow
have to
us.
say, I'm just going to interject because as somebody who has eaten at the restaurant many times, I make it a point to try to make it a meeting place. If I have a meeting and
I
I
know
bring
you do.
people into, bring people to PS Kitchen and talk to them about the mission behind it. But the food is wonderful. And I know we've talked about this many, many times where, you're wanting to get obviously the biggest audience to come to the restaurant, and you have a vegan burger on the menu, for example. For those people out there who are just dying to have their burger, there is a vegan, completely plant-based burger that is wonderful. And again, just to reiterate, as a non-biased person, I definitely will say that the food is terrific, and the team has done an incredible job about creating something where you want to choose that place for a variety of reasons, and not the least of which is that the food is delicious.
Thank you. Yes. And it really, we talked about like, I just want someone to, and there has been, I want them to borrow the idea of all the little PSs. So it's all about exposure. Maybe you're starting a business and you've never thought about, oh, I can actually employ this whole population who are hungry for work, who many of them just want to start over. Or maybe you're someone who's never thought about eating vegan a few times a week, and that we can actually make a difference just being exposing people with what we believe and our passion. And you would never know how conversation gets started, just like the conversation I had with Dr. Yunus, and the seed that gets planted, you never know where it takes you.
Right. And now one of the other, I want to drill down on all of the PSs. So you mentioned, as was shown so beautifully in the video, that you hire predominantly formerly incarcerated or formerly trafficked individuals. So talk to us about that, because again, this social business has layer upon layer of impact. And in a city like New York, we were discussing this, that, it is so incredibly difficult to have restaurant work experience without having restaurant work experience. So in New York City, you can't just walk into a restaurant, hand in a resume and say, and expect to get a job as a waiter or waitress or a dishwasher in the back, because if you don't have that experience on that resume, you will likely not get hired. Add to that any kind of, background, which as you said in the video, makes you check an employment box that states very clearly that you have been formerly incarcerated. And, many people will just take that resume and put it in a no pile immediately. So talk to us about that commitment, because it's such an enormous layer in your social business.
Yes, thank you. And also, as you can imagine, immigrants, part of my own story, and somebody giving us a chance, and just a wide range of population. And we have a lot of just amazing, experienced, wonderful, normal restaurant workers that have helped me build this business as well. And, earlier you asked why a restaurant. I came home from this trip and I had already known that I want to start a social business. And it was so backward, because then we're like, okay, what business should we start? Which is not normally how things get started. And I think one of the things is, of course, restaurants, and it's where you have wonderful memories. It's where people gather. It's where you tell your friends about it. I was thinking, if I started like a paper printing social business, it might still have some of the impact, but I don't think we could get Oprah to come or you and Dr. Yunus to be our very first guest on the second floor when we open. There's something really, I love that our fans became our natural PR. But really, I think the biggest reason why I decided to go with a restaurant at that time, it's the fact that I wanted to be a place where almost anybody who really truly wanted to start working right away we can find something to do.
Mm.
Not that it's an easy business to run by any means, but there are so many different type of roles that you can start right away, and that you also have a place to grow. And hopefully, it becomes a place that you can then take that skill sets and go wherever, considering the number of restaurants are in New York City. And we have done that. I think I've shared one of my favorite memories ever that made all this effort seem worth it. As you know, it ended up taking 2.5 years to build it out. And it was one of the most tearful project in its own way. But when we finally finished and I was able to bring this, passion baby of mine to the world, I was volunteering at a prison a few months after. And I didn't realize that one of the staff that I had personally hired at a Christmas party at Defy Ventures actually came from this prison. So when the board chair were introducing board members, like, this is April, she's also on the board, da, da, da. Oh, and she's actually the one who hired Saron. And I didn't realize that he's one of the most loved, popular, famous guys in there. And literally, it was the most beautiful scene of my investment bank colleagues who I brought into prison with me standing in between these other men who are so excited, who love Saron, and all of them just stood up and gave us this beautiful standing ovation. And people were clapping like crazy. And I was just overhearing conversations saying things like, wow, that's the real deal. It's in Times Square. Oh, wow, he got hired 3 weeks after he got out. And all of that love and excitement just really encouraged me. And a few months after that, in my next visit, one of the guys that was there as an audience, his release date was coming out. And he asked me, I know you can't promise anything, but I just want to let you know that October is my release date, and I would love an opportunity to come and do the same thing. And I saved him a job. I told my staff about it. And then by the time he was out, 3 hours later, he was hired at PS Kitchen.
Wow.
And that's not something I can do, necessarily with my day job, obviously, and maybe with most businesses, but I'm so excited that we get to do that. And actually throughout the pandemic, we've kept him on, and it's helpful for us, for him, for just the general culture, especially when you have to go to your parole officer and say that, I've really made a change. Just having a job, it's extraordinarily helpful.
It's life-changing. It's life-changing. You mentioned the pandemic. So restaurants, it's no secret that restaurants took, an enormous toll. It's almost difficult to sort of comprehend how much the restaurant industry, as well as the arts industry. I know we talked very early on in the pandemic, like, how is this going to work? And you and PS Kitchen made some incredible pivots. So can you tell us about how your social business, despite the pandemic, continued to thrive?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, now it's almost back to pre-pandemic level, which I'm so grateful for. As I was telling you and Dr. Yunus earlier, at first it was really scary to sign that 15-year lease and to say, we're doing this, we're committing to this rent in Times Square, for half the time we've been alive. And at the time it felt alone, but as you are getting traction and as more people heard about what we're doing, I've just been so humbled and grateful that friends, community, or even people we don't even know have kind of rallied around us and actually wanted to keep the restaurant going. I was faced, probably like you were in the beginning of the pandemic, being like, is this wise? Am I supposed to keep going? Just because you're doing something good doesn't make it easy necessarily, right? And I remember being just knowing that I had to make a decision of, if I continue this on, am I being wise? Even if the money it's not for me that I've earned, could it be used for a different cause? Am I supposed to keep paying rent? It's just all these different questions. And I couldn't believe the amount of people that have come around us. Like one example was just a flurry of requests of, what about feeding the medical workers community? We can get people to buy nurses and doctors and janitors at hospitals dinner, and we end up doing that and end up sending 11,000 meals to hospitals.
Wow, 11,000.
Yeah, and then the same thing but then my heart really started to get pulled toward those who don't have shelter to be in place, all the homeless people in New York City. And Dr. Yunus helped us be part of our gala that ended up sending 9,000 meals to the Bowery Mission downtown. But what was most shocking to me till this day, I still can't believe, is a friend of a friend of a friend, someone I still have never met at this point in my life, heard about what we're doing and knew that we have a unique model, and that it was a few young kids trying to take their savings and just trying to start this business. And he called us and asked how much is our rent and how much is our utilities. And never did I ever expect for their response to say, we want to help you keep going. So here's a check and you can take this to pay your rent and utilities and try to keep this business going. And because of that, we end up being able to pivot and did the hospitals, did the Bowery Mission project, started our own coffee from Rwanda, and was able to have an online product, just all these different ways that really got us through the pandemic and slowly hiring people back. We also were very thoughtful about who we kept on and then how we can help everybody to immediately get on unemployment. And just wanted to be holistic about our care. And we also had emergency funds that anybody on our staff, if you need anything, literally, it's like no question asked, like, okay, here's some cash to make sure so nobody goes.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What was really touching was at the end when we were realizing like we actually still had some of the money left, and we want to make sure everyone's taken care of. And some of the responses that we got was, oh, I'm good, I got an appointment, make sure you help so and so. And then this person would be like, make sure you help so and so. And we just were
paying forward. Yeah, the paying it forward
around.
Make sure the team was protected and taken care of.
Yeah. So it was incredible. I think through the pandemic actually what encouraged me to, okay, I'm going to finish the rest of this lease. We're going to be around for another 9 years because I'm not doing this by myself.
Yeah, absolutely. That's incredible. April, I know we only have a little bit more time. I want to encourage anybody listening today to please put your comments or questions in the chat. And if we have a few minutes, we'll get to a couple of those questions. So now that you have this thriving social business, despite this pandemic right now, as you said before, you're up to 70% occupancy, around the same sort of, levels as before, and revenue, excuse me. What are your social business dreams for the future? What are the kinds of things that you're thinking about now that you've had this, incredible experience? And you know what they say, if you can make it in New York, you can kind of make it anywhere. So what are the opportunities that you see for this being a social business model that other people can replicate, even if it's just one of the incredibly impactful ways that you've set PS Kitchen up? How do you see that moving forward?
Yeah, so many social business dreams. That is the fun thing about starting early in life, and you can really, there's so much I want to do with this, and been completely grateful and shocked to how this brand just kind of went on its own. You saw the pictures of like Oprah coming and different things like that, where we had never had we never thought about asking or reaching out to her. It just kind of happened. So I would love to start a franchise model. A lot of people have asked us about, can we start one here? Can you help us replicate this? Even if it's on our own brand, I would love to help other people start their own restaurants that employ the population we care about, which I've had many of those conversations, or starting a plant-based restaurant. I love that I've actually had a few conversations where people want to do all of it. They want to do all three of the PSs.
Great model.
Great, even better. So please do that. Steal it all, that is part of the concept of generosity being the inspiration behind it all. And that's the same thing with our model. So hopefully replicating, hopefully getting a lot more people employed. And, through one of the programs that I work with called Defy, where our graduates, normal recidivism rate, it's as high as 50% of people coming home and then going back within
50%.
Yeah, within 1 to 3 years. It's, as we talked about, it's hard to get that first chance. Not everyone is going to want to take the chance on you. And what are you going to do to make a living, or that is like your safe environment to go back to your old lifestyle? And yet in this program, with a mentor, with a stable job, actually we've been able to keep 80 to 85% go in the New York chapter staying out. And we work with other programs that are just as impactful for this population. And same thing with trafficking victims. If you want a woman to stay out of that lifestyle, and they honestly want it too, especially after a time like the pandemic where you can feel so lost and alone, mentor, safe housing, and a job, those are like 3 simple but so difficult core factors that you can get someone, allow someone to start over in the way that they want it to be.
That's incredible. April, we talked a little bit about how PS Kitchen is a hub. And, you're a hub for the theater world that surrounds you. It is in the heart of the theater district. And so many cast members from the various Broadway shows, which are hopefully coming back now and opening back up to the public, they come and they see what you're doing with PS Kitchen. You have your colleagues from, from very hardcore business oriented, profit driven, business oriented world coming through, and you, as you said, you're talking to them about what social business is. How do you have that conversation to allow people the opportunity to welcome that kind of economic thinking to the table? What does that go? Because you're an amazing ambassador for the social business thinking, and for the cause, and for the, as I said, the opportunity to sort of create social business. How do you have that conversation? I'm just curious, because you, of all people, have have a circle which is very much into the sort of capitalist economic thinking. And so I wonder again how you invite that with what you do.
Thank you. It's easy to be an ambassador. It just makes sense. The idea just makes
I think so too.
I'm just like, it just comes up.
But I'm sure you have the conversations where it's, question after question, how does this work? And, how do you make room for that? Because again, going back to one of the quotes that we saw at the beginning of this discussion, my Dr. Yunus always says, it's not necessarily that you're trying to drive out anyone's system, right? You're inviting people to think about it in a different way. And given what the pandemic has brought to all of our world, all of our global community, I think people are seeing that there is a plethora of ways to approach things. So I'm curious how you invite that and where that goes. And maybe you can tell us about your sort of most successful conversation where you could see someone coming around to that, and maybe one of the hardest where you're like, okay, this person is not interested, and that's okay too. I'm just curious because I know you've had that conversation and that's how you lead your life. So it's a very, very interesting perspective that you bring to that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's so fun. I love colliding my worlds. You know, I've had colleagues that are, I mean, all of it. I've had colleagues that are like, but why is it vegan? Like with like the most grimmest face, you know? And then I have people who are super passionate about animal rights that have now, because of it, gotten interested in human rights. And bringing I actually brought one of my staff to Haiti with me. And after he saw the working condition of some of the people that we work with, the joy that people have in their classes and things like that, he got really interested in about Haiti. And funny enough, the founder of the organization actually wanted to become vegan. And it's just the way that you can, through your passion, make it contagious, that people can speak to each other about what they believe in. And I would say one of the most successful conversations, again, this is like one of those funny surprises, I can take no credit for it. Our CEO actually came to dinner one day at my bank, and I obviously didn't invite him and I didn't know he was coming, but I just happened to be at the restaurant. And I went up to him and I introduced myself as the owner of this restaurant and told him about the business. And he was like, oh, that's really, really cool. And then at the end, I was like, oh, and I also work for you. And he's like, what? And I told him that as one of the Morgan Stanley at this, one of the employees at Morgan Stanley, and one of the women, just long veterans, all of that, like, has actually allowed me to see that I can combine the two worlds. And he was super kind and super interested. And he actually said, when my wife and daughter gets here, can you please come back and retell them everything you just told me? And next thing I knew, he actually started telling his committee about the restaurant. Wow. And we're just kind of like went on from there. And we were getting a lot of support of people just not personally coming and trying out the food and different things like that. So yeah, again, it was one of those things where you just kind of live it out and you try to be vulnerable, put yourself out there, whether it be through your own lifestyle, living simply, whether it be through taking a chance or just sharing about it. Sometimes it could feel really vulnerable, and you would get some of those conversations of like, why is it vegan? Or like, why do you believe in giving people second chances? And when it's one of your passion, you can feel defensive about, well, of course I want it to be this way. But I think once people experience it and see the heart behind it, I'll just say, like, I remember when things got really difficult as we were building it, and a mentor of mine had said, are you sure you don't want to just cut your losses short? And, you know, God saw your heart and it's okay that you tried, and just salvage this while you can before you pour out more of your savings. And I just remember thinking, well, I guess at the end of my life, when I'm on my deathbed, would I be glad that I gave this my all and really tried it out? Or would I have been glad that I salvaged, the last bit of savings that I had? And I guess it just comes down to some of those thinking of, okay, this is how I want to be remembered.
Yeah, that's beautiful. April, last question because I know we have to wrap up. This has been such a wonderful conversation. What would be your advice to anyone listening who hasn't taken the plunge in starting their own? What's your best advice in starting a social business?
I think I'm borrowing this from Dr. Yunus, but starting something small, I really just think just start something. You don't have to do a restaurant. You don't have to build it out. We initially actually just thought about it as like a little wine delivery business only in Christmas. That was like, let's just start something small. And it's the same reason why I quoted Mother Teresa earlier of when you can't feed 100, just feed one. I love the idea of just starting, and you would be surprised of how people rally around you, and you would be surprised by getting to see the small, big, giant impact you have really keeps you going.
Beautifully stated. Thank you so much, April. It's been such a pleasure talking with you today and hearing more about your story, your social business, PS Kitchen, which I really want to encourage anyone, if you're in New York, please go to PS Kitchen, follow them on Instagram, follow April on Instagram, and check out at Sing for Hope as well on Instagram if you have a chance. And thank you all for being with us today. I'll turn it over to Zinat.
Thank you very much. This has been a great conversation. I love the energy, the positivity, the frank conversation, basically. I think it's a really important, advice that you've shared, especially for our, YSBCs, the, social business network universities, because students often want to, start something new, but they're scared. So I think, your frank conversation is really an honest reflection of how it can go, Thankfully, you were very lucky, even in the pandemic, and it shows how if you have a good cause, people reach out. I mean, you mentioned you got help with the rent and all out of the blue from strangers, so that's really incredible at a time when everyone's in a fund crunch. So I'm really happy that such a social business restaurant exists in New York, of all the places, and it really is promising to other the entrepreneurs all over the world. So we have a social business competition coming up, so I encourage young people to think of such ideas, social business restaurant, targeting people who are often overlooked and who often don't get second opportunities. Such issues not only, it's an issue for US, one of the richest countries, and such issues are also in other developing countries. What your country is, where you're from, social problem exists everywhere. And another issue that PS Kitchen looks at is the vegan, the plant-based, environment is a very important factor. So I encourage all of our students, young people watching this session to think about these issues and maybe address them in the social business competition and the social fiction challenge that will be coming up soon. You will be able to find the information on our social media, the Yunus Center Facebook page and Social Business Center Facebook page. So please do look out at those pages and bring in your ideas, bring more PS Kitchen ideas, and hopefully they will get represented on our global platform. And who knows, there can be so many more PS Kitchens and so many more social business enterprises, social businesses all over the world. So thank you very much to our moderator and our speaker today. We really appreciate you sharing such a frank and honest, such a positive conversation. So thank you very much. Really happy to have you, and we welcome you to join our other sessions. We have all these lecture series every the first and third Monday of every month. So thank you to our audience, and with that we conclude our session today. But before that, we have a slideshow on upcoming lectures. Thank you very much. We'll see you again in the next lecture. Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye to everyone. Please follow our social media for updates and our social business media for the latest